Has anybody looked at any of the videos? Are they okay? Is the sound okay?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Good. Good. Okay. All right. So let's talk about layers. All right. Any questions on any drawing or modification commands so far? Seem to be doing okay. Okay. Well, let's talk about layers. So far, you've all been drawing lines, right? You had some drawing exercises, but when you draw, you're not very selective of what layer you're drawing on. You haven't been selective so far, right? Meaning all of your lines are likely whatever color, when you opened up the drawing, whatever color those lines were, you drew on there, right? But we do have an organizational system that organizes our lines, both visually and per line weight in our AutoCAD drawings, and we organize all of these things using layers, okay? So let me just talk about, there's a couple things we need to maybe clarify about layers and line weights and different things like that, I think, before we actually talk about how to create layers, so that you understand maybe when I say line weights, what that means, and different terms like that. Maybe I've asked this, has anybody ever hand drafted in here? Not really? Yeah. A little bit, maybe? Okay, so when you're hand drafting, you put your piece of paper down, right? And you get your scale rule out and you're plugging your electric eraser, right? Aren't we glad we don't have to use those? But you also have a bunch of pencils that you use, right? And some of them are very thick pencils and some are very thin. And there are things on your drawings that require very thick pen weights and very thin pen weights, right? So for example, like if we have a floor plan, and I'm gonna use colors to illustrate thicknesses of pens, just because I don't really have pen thicknesses with markers, right? But black will be the thickest pen weight. It'll be a very heavy, thick line, and then maybe blue will be the medium pen weight. It'll be and red will be the thinnest, and blue will kind of be in between these, right? So we kind of have heavy, medium, and light, right? So on any floor plan, when you're drawing, the heaviest line on the floor plan is always going to be the cut plane, all right? And the cut plane means that when you're drawing a floor plan, the way that you draw a floor plan is as if you cut the building horizontally at 3 feet and you're looking down on it, right? That's kind of the method of determining what you draw on a floor plan and how thick the lines are going to be, okay? You also have sections, like a vertical cut of a building, right? And you know the elevations, which are just a view, a drawing view of a plane, a vertical plane in space, right? But a floor plan is essentially, it is a horizontal cut of the floor plate at 3 feet, 3 to 4 feet, and you're looking down on that floor plan. And whatever you see is what you draw, okay? Now, we organize things within that floor plate by line weight, right? So line weights will help you graphically, visually be able to read a set of plans, okay? So the cut line, anything that you cut through is always a really heavy pen weight, right? So things like walls, windows, and doors, those are going to be the heaviest pen weights because you cut through them, okay? You're going to have things on the floor, you know, so things on the floor are going to be furthest away from the cut plane as you're looking down, and those are going to be the lightest items, right? So things like floor finishes, or if there's a hatch on the floor, like like an access panel that you open up, right? Those would be the lightest pen weights. And then you'll have kind of those medium pen weights, which are things in between. So things like furniture, chairs, different types of equipment, they're in between the cut plane and the floor plane, right? So we kind of have heavy, medium, and light, right? Does that make sense, right? And we do that so that graphically, when you look at a set of drawings, you can essentially read it like a book, right? You want to be able to hand over a set of drawings to a contractor and they can look at it and say, I know where the walls are because they're the heaviest. I know that those really light lines are on the floor, so that's probably a floor hatch. And I know that stuff that's kind of a medium pen weight in between is likely going to be furniture, stairs, millwork, countertops, different things like that, right? So it graphically gives the contractor a cue as to where things are in the drawing so that they can read it properly, right? So things that are going to have the heaviest pen weight, walls, doors, and windows, right? The walls, doors, and windows don't necessarily have the exact same pen weight, but they're in the heavy pen weight family, right? So we kind of have these big subsets, or these big groups of things that are in the heavy pen weights, but they also kind of grade down within the heavy pen weights, meaning walls are the heaviest, okay, then we have doors that are in the like second heaviest, right, and then we have windows, which are maybe going to be the third out of the heaviest pen weights, okay, so we rank these things in architectural importance, doors and then windows, okay, so walls are the heaviest, right, we'll call this 1, doors, and then 3 windows, okay, and those are the heavy pen weights, all right, then we have, we'll use blue, right, to be consistent. Then we have our medium pen weights, okay? And our medium pen weights are going to be things in that kind of mid-range of the floor plan, right? So just like the heavy pen weights, we grade things down within the medium pen weights, right? So we have medium number 1, which could be things like furniture, okay? Or actually not even furniture, sorry, let me take that back. Things like stairs. And maybe things like, well, we'll do number 2, we'll do millwork, like cabinets, right? And then maybe things like furniture or equipment, okay? So we have the medium pen weight, which is in between the cut line and the floor, but then we have kind of these great, these gradations, I guess, of the medium pen weights. Stairs and things that are built in and are architectural, right? Pony walls, half walls, and then millwork and furniture and equipment. And then we have the light pen weights, right? And the light pen weights, and we're going to abbreviate it kind of, LITE. We also have that same grading, 1, 2, and 3. And light pen weights are going to be things that are on the floor, right? Things like floor finishes. And we also have, generally, it's going to be hatching. And we'll do hatch twice. Because we have a light hatch and kind of a medium hatch, okay? So these are going to be kind of our pen weights, right? Heavy pen weights, medium pen weights, light pen weights. Heavy pen weights are going to be thick and dark. So if we think of it in terms of kind of exaggerating how this looks, right? It's going to be a heavy pen weight. And then a medium pen weight is going to be, it's going to be pretty good size, but thinner than the heavier pen weight, right? And then we're going to have the light pen weight, which is just very thin. Okay, so when I look at a set of drawings, I know exactly what is what, and I can read those set of plans visually. Okay, this kind of makes sense a little bit. Okay, now in your book, if you go all the way to like the 3rd to last page, we have a line weight chart. This is something you'll look at. This is when you get a job, right? This is something that you will likely get from the office that you're working at, and they'll print it out and they'll give it to you, and you'll put it up by your desk and you'll look at it every day so that you can remember what pen weights they use for what items in their office, right? But this gives you the idea of heavy, medium, and light, right? And you'll see that if we just start at the top, color 1 through 9, or color 1 through 8, we'll say color 1 through 8. Right? Color 1 is obviously the heaviest color, but 1, 2, and 3, those are kind of the heavy colors, but they're grades 1, 2, and 3. And 4, 5, and 6, those are the mediums, and they're graded down 1, 2, and 3. And then 7 and 8, and then probably, I'll show you another one in a minute, but 7, 8, and 9, 7 and 8, and then another one I'll show you, are going to be those light finishes, okay? And they're going to grade down as well. So we have this way of sort of grading all of our line weights down, okay? You've probably guessed that we use layers to do this, right? Okay, so if everybody kind of understands that idea, right, let's talk about how layers play into this system, all right? I'm just in my normal model space here. Our layers, the layer tools are located on the Home tab, and we have our layered tool palette right here, okay? If I click on this button right here, okay, click, which looks like it has some new options in it, this is what I get, and I can expand this a little bit, right? I can make it bigger. Over here on the side, we see something that says filters. We're not going to really worry about that just yet. We have some buttons up here at the top, some icons. And then over here, we've got, I'm going to expand these a little. We have some options as well, okay? Before I get going on this, I just want to show you how we sort of assign line weights to our layers, okay? And the way that we do that is by color. So the different colors of lines that you see in AutoCAD represent different pen weights, all right? And if you look at your color / line weight chart, right, we see color number 1, pen number 1, and then it has a thick line, right? So the colors that we're going to be using, number 1, here's a pretty good rule that I'm going to stand by for this semester, right, until you guys get a little bit better at AutoCAD. I want you to mainly stay here in these colors. These are called the index colors. So all the way from color 1 all the way to color 9, and then these colors down here, 250 to 254. So don't use any of these colors up here, okay? We're not going to deal with those right now. But what I want you to recognize is that if we look at color number 1, pen number 1 on our color line weight file, we see it's a very thick line, all right? And if I hover over this color right here, do you see just above it says index color 1, right? So red is index color number 1, and pen number 1 is that very thick, heavy pen weight, all right? Now, on your line weight file, on your chart here, if you look at the very bottom of the page, it also says pen number 1 is 0.7. You see that? That means 0.7 millimeters. So pen number 1 is red. Red is index color number 1. And number 1 also is 0.7 millimeters thick. Okay, so if you were hand drafting, you would take out your, morning. Do you guys all know Kevin?
Yep.
Yeah? So if you were all hand drafting, you would use your 0.7 pen, right, to get that thickness, okay? So that's what that means, essentially. Color number 2, right, is yellow. And if I look at my pen chart, right, color number 2, it's thinner than color number 1, but it's still a pretty thick pen. And if I look down at the very bottom of that line weight chart, it says pen number 2 is 0.5 millimeters, all right? So if we think of it in terms of, you know, it's a heavy pen, but it's maybe like, you know, not as thick as number 1, it could be number 2. Number 2 we can use for doors, right? Okay, so layers are used, number 1, to assign line weights to objects in AutoCAD. Okay, there's kind of another step in that, and we'll talk about that in a second. All right. Another thing that was kind of the most important thing I wanted to talk about with regards to layers. So now I'm going to talk about what else layers can do for you in AutoCAD. And another thing that layers can do for you in AutoCAD is they can organize your objects. Okay, so we have the graphic nature of layers. They allow us to have thicker, thin pen weights, which allow our drawings to be read correctly. Okay, they're graphically correct. The second thing that layers allow us to do is to organize our objects on our screen. All right, so when we create layers, we create them according to architectural element, and then things are grouped according to architectural elements in AutoCAD. And what that means is we create a layer that's called doors, and all of the doors go on that layer, right? And that layer has a pen weight associated with it so that it prints correctly. Okay, we create a layer called windows or glazing, right? And all of the windows go on that layer, right? So they're all on the same layer, they all have the same pen weight, right? So we organize things according to architectural elements in our layering system, okay? On Monday, when we meet, Tuesday, when we meet again, we'll talk about how we formally name layers. We're not going to talk too much about that today. Other than just to say we name them like door and window and, you know, very simple things like that. But we do group things according to architectural elements, and those layers are named according to architectural elements. Okay, so layers establish line weights, they establish organization, and that organization is part of that is visual control and a couple of other things. So we can visually control our objects because they're grouped together on layers using layers, right? So if I look at, for example, I'm going to pop over here to this layer file. I'm going to close this out. Okay, so if you open this layer file, I have layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, right? We kind of recognize that that makes sense because of what we saw in our line weight chart, right? I mean, so far we don't really have a lot of architectural elements grouped on these layers, right? Because we don't have any in this drawing. But what I can show you is how these are visually controlled. I'm going to open up my layer properties dialog box here. I'm going to kind of drag it over here a little bit. Okay, so we can see these things over here. And we can see, we'll talk about how these are created, but I see layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Layer number 1, I know that's a current layer because it has a check mark next to it. All right, so I'm going to go to layer number 2. And when I say things can be visually controlled by layers, we have the option to visually turn things off using layers. So if I am very diligent and I group everything accordingly in my drawing, right? All the doors go on the door layer, all the windows go on the window layer, all the walls go on the wall layer, right? If I'm very diligent about that, then when I only want to see the walls, I can turn everything else off and you know, through the layer system, and I can just look at the walls. Okay, so it makes it really helpful. You probably maybe all may know, may not know, but certain drawings only visually require certain things on them, right? So for example, on the ceiling plan, I don't really want to see the floor finish, right? That doesn't make sense. And so layers help me control visually those things, right? What's nice about layers is I can control the visual nature of these, but they're not gone, right? They're not deleted out of these drawings. They're just visually unavailable, right? So I can turn those things on and off. And I can turn multiple things on or off, right? Using my layer dialog box. Okay. I can also control editability of these objects. So if I want to make a layer unavailable to be edited, I can lock it down. So you'll notice that we have a little sunshine here, we have a little light bulb, we have a little lock and a printer, and then the color. We also have some line weight things going on this direction, which we'll talk about in a minute. So my little lock right here, if I click on it, do you see how the yellow layer, you see how it dimmed a little bit, right? So if I lock a layer, that means that if I select it, you see how a little lock pops up. If I select it and I hit delete, it won't delete. Essentially, I lock that layer, meaning it's not editable when I have the lock activated. Okay, so I can turn layers on and off. I can lock or unlock them. Morning. I can make them non-printable. So there's a little printer right here. This layer, if I don't want it to print, right? I just want to use it for reference. I have an existing floor plan that I need to use for reference. It needs to be in here so I can visually see it, but I don't want it to ever print, and confuse things. I can put it on a layer that is non-printable, right? So layer number 2 doesn't look any different, but if I go to actually print it, which let me just do a quick little, it doesn't print, okay? And do you see how the line weights right here are reading, right? I have a thick, that would be kind of the medium, and then these kind of grade down. Okay. I also have the ability to manipulate my line type in the layer dialog box here. So the line type means, is it dashed? Is it a dash dash dot? Is it a center line? Is it a continuous line? Is it a hidden line type where it looks dashed? But I can control the, again, this is kind of a visual item. I can control what the line looks like, right? So if I come here to continuous, I'm going to go over this. Let me just pick one and I'll show you what happens. But do you see all the different line types that we can associate with this layer, right? So if I, for example, pick hidden, we'll choose that one. Okay. Okay. You see my line looks dashed. All right. A hidden line type is a dashed line type. It's kind of weird terminology, I think. I think it maybe has to do with we have some hidden areas of our, I don't know, some hidden areas of our line. But a dashed line weight is called a hidden line type. Okay. All right, so things that we can control through layers, we can control the pen weights, we can control the visibility on the screen. They organize objects in our AutoCAD, right, according to architectural element. We can lock layers so that things are not editable, right? This is a really good feature when you have, worked on a design and you have all the walls where you want them to be and you don't want anybody messing around with them, right? They're perfect. So you lock that layer down so they don't accidentally, do something to them. We can make things non-printable, which will make sense in a few weeks. We can change the color of our layer, right? I can click on the color here, and if I want to choose blue, I can hit OK, and it changes to blue. Everything on that layer changes to blue, right? Changes that are made through the layer are universal. So every object on that layer or assigned to that layer will take on those properties once you change properties of that layer, okay? And we're not going to worry about any of these things. I want to give you one little, it's advice, but just don't do it, right? Don't ever, at least in this class, if you work in an office and they do it differently, that's fine. But the line weights right here, these are always going to remain default. Don't ever change these, okay? I think that when you first start doing this, when I show you how to print with layers, a lot of people start changing these, and I understand why, which we'll talk about. But always leave these this line weight area default, okay?
As you set it up, will it automatically change the line thickness as you go, as you assign layers?
Well, so you're asking, like, if I assign yellow, does this line weight know that it's 0.6 millimeters or whatever?
Without changing it from default.
Right. Yeah, so what we do is we leave this very generic, and we use what's called a CTB file to inform what red, yellow, green, blue means, right? So we put this other file that says, hey, AutoCAD, these colors mean this, right? And what's nice about that is I can leave this very generic, use this file, which is easy to change out, kind of, and if you have a couple of different clients that want a couple of different line weights, you can just manipulate that using this little file instead of changing these every single time. Yeah. Okay, so here is our layer dialog box. Okay, if I want to create a brand new layer, right, I have some options up here. I have new layer, I have freeze and viewports, which we're not going to worry about right now, delete layer, and set current. Okay, to create a new layer, obviously I click on new layer. All right, a couple things I want you to notice about new layer. Number one, it allows you to edit the name. Okay, so I can name this something like door, enter. Another thing you're going to want to notice is that when a new layer is created, it will create a copy of the layer that you have either, number one, just created or have been currently using, right? So you notice that this layer right here has all the same properties of the layer above it, right, which I was just editing or using, okay? So, it may not seem like a big deal unless that layer was non-printable, and then you make 50 layers that are non-printable, right? And you draw everything and it looks wonderful, and then you panic when you go to print because nothing is showing up, right? Which happens. It's easily fixed, but sometimes to get to figuring out the fix is the hard part, okay? All right, so we can create a new layer. We can delete layers if there's nothing on them. It just sometimes can be a little tricky. So if I wanted to, for example, get rid of layer 6, I would click on it, well, there's something on it. Oh, no, there's not. No, there's not. I would hit delete, and it would delete that layer, okay? Sometimes you can have layers that you think are blank and have nothing on them, but there may be something or there was something and you didn't get it all. And so deleting layers is a little bit unreliable at times, but you can do it. I'm going to undo that. We can also make a layer current, okay? A layer that is current has a check mark by it, and what it means to be current is that is the layer that you're drawing on. All right, so if I click on layer 6 and I click the check to make it current, right? When I go to draw my lines, click, click, you see they're magenta, escape, escape, because I am drawing currently on layer 6, all right? You could also double click on this little piece of paper, click, click. It's not even, well, I guess it looks like a piece of paper, and that makes it current, okay? All right, so this kind of little visual cue right here, this is something I maybe should just comment on. All of these layers in AutoCAD, they're all kind of laid one on top of the other, right? It's just like a bunch, each of these layers is like a piece of trace paper, right? So you create a new layer, you pull out a piece of trace paper, you tear it out of your notebook, you lay it down, you draw on it, right? And the next one, you take out another piece of trace paper, you tear it out, you lay it down over that first piece that you'd already drawn on, and you draw on that one, right? They're separate. You can see through them to see objects, working together on the screen. I guess that's it. They're all separate, and you can see through them to see objects together, right? In AutoCAD, digitally, we can manipulate them to turn them on and off. But these are all just like pieces of paper that are stacked one on top of another, okay? It makes it really easy to be able to manipulate objects in AutoCAD, okay? Any questions so far? No? Not a whole lot of questions. Maybe I'll take that as a good sign, right? All right. Okay, so let's look at, we have our layer dialog box here. This area over here called filters, I'm just going to click on this little icon and close that up. I don't really need that. We're not going to use it right now. But one thing I want you to notice, right, I do have all of my layers created here, right? You're going to see up here in, this is my layered dialog or tool palette. Up here in my, this is a tool palette, but this is also a tool palette, I guess. Technically, this is more of the manager, the properties manager. But up here in my ribbon, you're also going to see some similar items up here, right? To open up my layer properties manager, I clicked on this icon. Click. To close it, I click it again. Click, open it up. I can close it out by clicking on the close. I can kind of hide it and dock it on the side. Click by clicking on that, right? If you have two screens, you can take this and you can put it on your other screen, right? And use it from there. I'm going to open that back up. Okay. I don't know. Maybe this just kind of goes back to AutoCAD didn't used to look like this, right? And I'm all discombobulated with how AutoCAD has changed. But I like to I don't really even like to have it kind of on my screen. When I'm done with it, I close it out, right? But it's personal preference, however you want to use it. What's nice about AutoCAD now is that you do have a lot of those layer property manager options up here in this tool palette, right? So you'll notice that I have a drop down right here, okay? This drop down, whatever layer is showing, that is the current layer. So if I go to draw, click, 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 escape, escape, I'm drawing on layer 5, which is blue. Okay. If I want to change that and make another layer current and I don't have my manager open, I can drop down, choose a layer, layer 3. Now that layer is current, right? I can come over to line and I can draw some lines. Okay. There are a lot of options in icon form here that we didn't used to have. All right, we have off, we have on, we have isolate and unisolate. I'll talk about all of these. Freeze, thaw, lock, unlock. We have make current and match layer. Okay. Then I'm going to open up my manager here real quick. Let me clarify one thing, which I don't know why I didn't say this in the first place. We talked about all of these different options right here, okay? We can turn things visually, right, on and off. What you're going to find, though, is that we have this little light bulb, right, which is on, and we have this little sunshine, okay, which is freeze thaw. This term is going to be used interchangeably with people who use AutoCAD, so I'm just going to explain it to you and then we'll talk a little bit about it. But this on-off feature, okay, if I'm, for example, on layer 3, which is green, it's the current layer, I can draw on layer 3. Great, and it's visible, right? If I try and freeze thaw using the sunshine layer 3, it'll say, hey, you can't do that because it's the current layer, okay? That means that it's the current layer that I can draw with, and using freeze thaw would essentially turn those lines off, right? So you can't visually see them, which AutoCAD won't allow, right? We want to be drawing things that we can see. Makes sense. Here's the wonky thing with AutoCAD. And for the life of me, I just don't really even understand why they have this, even after all these years. Maybe I should Google it, right? But we also have this little light bulb feature here, okay? If I click on the light bulb, it'll allow me to turn the current layer off, right? When I use the light bulb, the correct terminology is on-off, okay? When I use the sunshine, it's freeze-thaw. The same thing happens, right? So if I look at my screen, layer 3 is not visible, right? And it's because I clicked on that light bulb, okay? The same thing happens when I freeze-thaw with the sunshine. Now, the difference between the light bulb and the sunshine is that if I use the light bulb to make this layer non-visible, when I come in here and I click, guess what's happening? It's drawing invisible, right? What sense does that make? And it doesn't seem like a big deal because you would think that immediately you would recognize, hey, I'm drawing invisible lines, right? And you would turn that light bulb back on and see all these weird invisible lines and delete them, right? That makes sense. But there is always the chance that you could miss one, and it could be misrepresented as something else on your drawings, right? Like a line of a concrete pad, or a new wall, or a division between flooring materials, right? So I think this option, while you may think, oh, it's simple just to get rid of what you've created, can open up, some error, I guess. Open yourself up for some error. So usually, and not usually, always don't use this. Never use this, the light bulb. Especially professionally. Again, you're working with a lot of other people usually, and you just don't want any mistakes to happen, right? And so it's good practice just to stay away from the on-off and use the freeze-thaw, because the freeze-thaw won't allow me to draw invisible lines, right? It just turns things on and off, okay? Now, with that being said, you will hear through the entire industry, somebody will say to you, turn that layer off, right? And you think off is the light bulb. Why am I using, right? You think that terminology is the light bulb. But in fact, they actually mean freeze-thaw, right? I really don't think anybody ever means to tell you to use the light bulb to turn things on and off, right? So I say it all the time. I say, hey, turn that layer off, right? Turn it back on. And I don't mean use the light bulb, I mean use freeze-thaw, right? But it's just kind of the way everybody speaks, right? Turn it on, off, and that means freeze-thaw, okay? If I were you, I would actually come up to this on-off option and right-click over that menu, and I would uncheck the on-off, and just don't use it, right? We just don't want to open up ourselves for mistakes, okay? I'm going to delete these lines. Okay, so we have freeze-thaw, which turns things on and off, which I will say that. I'll say turn that off, turn that on, and I don't mean use the light bulb, right? I just mean visually make it available or not. We have the lock, we have the print, no print, right? We have the color, the line weight, or the line type, and then the line weight, which we're going to leave as default, okay? Just to remind you, these are color-dependent line weights. So red is a thick pen weight, blue is a thin pen weight, right? Okay, any questions so far? Anything? All right. So we have our little tool palette up here, right? Let me explain what all these things do, and then I'm going to talk about how we use layers, really, kind of in the real world, right? Because we're not always perfect at them, right? I'm not perfect at layers either. So we have the on-off feature up here. We know what that means, right? So if I click on, for example, off, click. This is more of an after-the-fact option. This means like I have these layers already generated, but now I want to perform a modification on them through the layers, right? So I click on off, and then I click on something, click, and anything on that layer turns off, right? But of course we don't want to use the light bulb. We want to use freeze-thaw, okay? So I'm going to undo, Control-Z. We have the isolate and unisolate. Isolate, lay ISO, I'm a keyboard person, right? Lay ISO, will allow you to isolate a single layer on your screen. So if I, for example, I'll click on isolate. If I just want to see this magenta layer, I click on it, enter, and everything else is frozen, okay? If I want everything to come back, I click on thaw, all layers. Not all of my layers have thawed. What is the shortcut? Hold on a second.
Unisolate.
Lay thaw. Yeah, I think we might need to do... Oh, I was clicking on the wrong icon, wasn't I? Like that always works. That's like my magic trick in AutoCAD. I love it. Isolate and on. Okay, unisolate. Sorry guys. Okay. Oop, let me. Now I've messed up my command line. There we go. Okay. So we have isolate and unisolate, right? Super helpful. Again, on the keyboard, it's lay ISO, and the shortcut is on to get it back on. Something I use constantly, right? Because when you're working in AutoCAD, you'll get thousands and thousands of pieces of geometry on your screen, and you need to be able to sort through those, right? And look at them and make changes and understand them. And to do that, you have to turn things, visually on and off, or isolate them to look at them and alter them. We have freeze thaw, right? We understand what those will do, right? So if I click on freeze and then I click on a layer that is not the current layer, because the current layer can't be frozen, like the layer 1, right? And anything that I pick, click, I can freeze them, okay? And you'll notice over here, correspondingly in the layer manager, all of those get frozen as well, okay? To turn them back on, we would thaw all layers, okay? We have the lock options, which same as the freeze thaw, so I'm not going to go through those. And then we have make current and match layer. All right. I'm going to draw a couple of lines over here. Okay. You see I use object tracking a lot. I didn't used to because it wasn't as reliable as it is now, honestly. But I use object tracking a lot now to get things to line up, right? Makes sense. It's really easy.
I love it.
Yeah, it kind of does. You're right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but so what I don't like, I guess it'll do those little construction lines a lot, those gray lines that I think are kind of annoying. And it leaves little points all over the place too, which is kind of annoying, but yeah, it kind of does do that same thing. Okay, so we have make current and match layer. All right, one of my biggest things that I don't like about AutoCAD is, I feel like it's a lot of this sounds silly. It's a lot of effort to sort through all of my layers, right? And that seems really silly thing to say right now, but when you start working, you'll have a drawing that has 400 layers in it, right? You're like, ugh, I know that I want that green layer and I know what it's called, but I have to, sort through or go in my layer manager and I have to, kind of scroll through all of the layers to find what I need, right? So this is kind of one of those things that gets a bit cumbersome in AutoCAD. But what this make current and match layer will allow you to do is it will allow you to, on the screen, if I, for example, want to use the red layer, and I don't remember what it's called, but I know this object is on the right layer, and I want to use it, I can click on it, and I can choose make current. Do you notice layer 3 is current right now? If I click on make current, it changes it to that layer, right? So that kind of saves me from scrolling through all of my layers to find the right layer that I want. When visually on the screen I can say, I want to use this layer. I don't want to scroll through 800 layers to find it. Click make current, and then when I go to draw, I can start drawing on that layer. Okay? And then we have match layer, which is it's again an on-screen kind of option that allows you to take one layer and match the color and property of that to another object. So match layer, which is also MA, click. It allows me to pick an object that I like, click, and match a second object. Click. Oh, select the object. There we go. Okay, so now I can match those two layers. MA, enter, click, click. Oh, it's locked. Do you see how it's locked? It won't let me do it, right? Let me unlock that layer. Click, oop, click, click, click. MA, enter, click. I think MA is easier, and I can just start grabbing things and matching them. Okay. So that will allow me to go back once I've created a bunch of layers and change them to what I want them to be. All right, which kind of leads me into how do we actually use layers, right? When I am drawing a drawing, right? Usually I will come in and I'll have good intentions, and I'll think, oh, I'm going to start on the correct layer, layer 2, and I initiate my line command and I come in and I start drawing walls. I turn my ortho on, right? Layers don't affect anything like drawing aids or ortho or your tracking or zooming or panning or anything else. They're kind of their own entity, right? But I'll go in there and I'll start drawing and I'll think, oh, that's great, you know, and then I need to draw something else, and I just continue drawing something else maybe over here, which maybe isn't necessarily on the right layer, right? Which I guess maybe my point with this is I don't always draw things on the correct layer first, right? So we need to be able to, once we've drawn something, change the layer to whatever is appropriate, right? And I do this all the time. I'll just get going drawing and then I'll think, oh, I haven't really been very good about my layering and I need to go back and change some things, right? So if I haven't created things on the right layer, you can select an object and you can use the drop down to change it to whatever layer you want it to be on. Okay, so there's that. Of course, I could use match properties, MA, enter, click, and I could start layering things that need to be on a specific layer. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways to manipulate and change layers to what they need to be when you've created them, essentially. But by far and away, I think the best way of going about layers is just making sure that you kind of, you know, do it right in the first place. But if you can't, then you can go back and change them. Okay. One thing that's a little tricky about layers is kind of knowing what layer is current when you're drawing, right? So, and it's tricky because if you have an object selected, do you notice that this says layer 4 and it's cyan, right? Ooh, bless you. But if I select an object like this green rectangle, now instead of showing the current layer, it displays the color of the layer that is selected, or the object that is selected, right? So if I hit escape, now I can see what the current layer is. If I select an object, then I get the layer that that object is on. Okay. All right, let's see here. Let me make sure I'm getting everything. Okay, let's talk about just, I think you may already know this, but let's talk about changing the color, and then let's talk about changing the line type. Okay. All right. So a couple final things today, and I think we'll just get to this layer creation type stuff. So layer manager, assigning line types, assigning color and line weights. I'm going to talk about a template file a little bit today. Oh, LT scale. We'll talk about LT scale I think next time. I think that'll be. And then next time we meet, we're going to talk about how to name layers, and then we'll talk about LT scale. Okay. But for today, we'll get through just a couple more things. Yes. Is there a way to change it so you can see the difference in line weights on while you're working? Well, it just doesn't really matter, I don't think. In AutoCAD, at least, there is a line weight option here, but from what I found, it doesn't. So line weight, click. So here's the thing about it. Number one, let me say I don't use it that often, so I may not even be able to get it here. Number one, because we're using our CTB file to associate line weights, you're not going to get a great preview of line weights here, number one, right? If I change this line weight to something, let's make it thick. Okay. And I've got my line weights displayed. Sorry, I'm hoping, where's my cyan color? Do I have any cyan? Okay. Okay, so because I have, there is that line weight, okay, this is a good explanation, right? Let me start over here. So there is a way to be able to visually see the line weights on your screen. Yes, okay. But what you're seeing here is that you can see the line weight, but it's still cyan, right? So it's not as if you're getting kind of that black and white kind of line weight differentiation that, you know, maybe you're looking for. And the other thing is that you see how all of these are just kind of remaining generic. They're that zero line weight, zero width line weight. It's because the system that we're going to use doesn't change this. And the representation of line weight that you're going to see on the screen is controlled by this. We're going to use another little file to control red means thick, blue means thin, instead of changing it right here. So yes, you can, but no, it's not very useful for us right now. Yeah. So I'm going to change this back to default. We'll see the magic happen, right? There you go. Okay. So let's talk about changing our line type. You saw me do it just kind of briefly, but let's formally, I'll show you how to work with that. Okay. And the line type, right, is the representation of the line, whether it's a continuous straight line, right, that doesn't have any gaps in it, or it is a hidden line type like this that's dashed, or it's you know, a dash dot or a center line or whatever. Okay. Different line types represent different things in drafting in general, right? So dash lines usually mean something below or above your cut plane. So if I have this 3-foot cut plane, right, on my floor plan, things that are dashed are generally above that, right? So they're not cut, but you need to maybe tell somebody it's there, right? You need to, if you're placing furniture in your floor plan, it will show in your floor plan, but maybe it's important for the electrician to know, hey, there's a projector right above this table, right? So you'll dash some things in for reference, right? Things below are also dashed in, like footings. So you have walls and sometimes your footings are dashed in. Or if maybe, you know, there's something weird below the floor, like a tunnel, right? Then you'll dash the tunnel in so that, you know, we know where that object is, so that if you're demoing, you have to be careful in that area, right? So dash lines and different line types represent different things in AutoCAD and in drafting in general, okay? So to change our line types, it's really pretty simple. You come into your layer manager. This cannot be done through your kind of quick access toolbar, but you'd click on line type. You will only have continuous here shown because you have to load line types. For whatever reason, they're not just all available here, okay? So we're going to click load. The line types that you're going to want to use, don't use any of these ACAD ones. Just use from batting. You could use batting all the way down to the end, right? But for example, if we wanted this line weight to be dots, I'd hit OK. It shows, but it's not attached yet, so I'm going to click on it and I have to hit OK. And now that cyan layer is going to be dots, right? You see that? It's still a continuous line. It still has a beginning, middle, and end point, but its representation is now dots, okay? I can change that from dot to, let's hit load, and choose, let's see, divide, right? Choose divide, hit OK, and now, oh, that line, it is divide, I can see it there, but it's not necessarily showing up very well. If I drag my line out a little bit more, I start to get the pattern, right? So that line was just a little bit too short to show the entire pattern of that line type, all right? Now there's going to be instances where we have something that comes into play called LT scale, where that will help us view line weights a little bit better, but we'll talk about that on Monday when we talk about naming our layers, okay? All right, so we can add line types. We can also change the color, right? So for example, if I assign cyan to this, and I thought, well, maybe I really don't want this to be cyan, I want it to be white. I click on white. I've clicked on cyan here. This pops up. Again, we're going to use just these index colors here. I click on the color I want. I hit OK, and now those are gray. The ones that were cyan before are gray now. Okay. So pretty easy to manipulate. I don't think layers are that difficult. They're just kind of involved, right? There's a lot of settings, a lot of things to remember. But once you get the hang of it, it's relatively easy. I'm gonna flip over to this AIA layers file, and let's talk about how we can associate layers here, right? So if you're just starting a brand new assignment, you don't really kind of know what to do, okay? Let's talk about how we go about that. Gosh, I'm also tempted, sorry, I was gonna assign an assignment called template today, but I'm actually tempted to wait until Monday with that one as well, because I want you to be able to name your layers correctly. You guys might not have a new assignment for this weekend. Will you be sad? I know, right? Let me look here at our assignments real quick. I mean, you have one. Okay, I think I'll wait till Monday to do the template file because I think we'll have time and I think it makes more sense with the proper names. So we'll wait on that one. Okay. But let's go through this. Let's talk about how we're going to assign layers. Okay. So if I have a brand new drawing, this drawing already has things in it, and we'll talk about this one, but I also kind of want to talk about if you have a brand new drawing, how you go about creating layers, okay? But we'll talk about if you already have a drawing like this one. This is a floor plan that's on CAD Common, obviously. How do I go about, you know, putting or associating layers with something that's already existing, right? Well, if I open my layer properties, I don't have really any layers created, right? I have a 0 layer and a depth points layer, right? Now the depth points layer, this is a layer that this is associated with dimensions. If you draw anything on depth points, it won't show up. It's non-printable and you can't change it, right? So don't ever draw anything on depth points, just kind of a good rule of AutoCAD. Stay away from that one. And then we also have layer 0. Layer 0 will be a layer that is in any out-of-the-box blank AutoCAD file, okay? And this is associated with creating blocks, right? And so it again is one of those layers where you don't want to draw on it unless you're creating a block, which you don't know what a block is yet. So we're going to stay away from these 2 layers, right, as far as drawing goes. But we are going to create some new layers and associate our floor plan. So I'm going to click on New Layer. And we'll call, for now, we'll simply call this something like Wall, right? And we'll create another layer. And I'll call this Door. And we'll create another layer. And we'll call this Plumbing Fixture, right? So for now, I'm just being very simple about my layer naming. I'm just calling things by architectural element, right? Maybe we have something like stairs, right? Plumbing fixtures, stairs. We have cabinetry, millwork. Okay. And we maybe have dimensions, which I'm going to leave alone for now, actually. So you saw what I did was I created a bunch of layers and they don't have any settings with them, right? And what I like about going that direction is that you remember how I said if you create a layer or you're altering a layer and then you create a new layer, it copies the layer you're previously working with. What I don't like about that system is that it can copy things I don't want it to copy, right? Like non-printable layers, right? So I kind of like to just do a bunch of blank, fresh layers and then associate the properties with them after the fact, okay? So the walls, now we're gonna have to start thinking about what layers objects go on, right? If they're heavy, medium, or light, okay? So walls, doors, and windows are always gonna be kind of in the heavy range. Stairs, millwork, furniture in the medium range. Furniture and equipment will include plumbing fixtures. And then things that are light are going to be floor finishes and hatches. Okay, and we'll get to hatches a little bit later. So if I think of those in terms of, let me come to my colors here, right? We have heavy, 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 light, medium, 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 light, light, light. Okay, so they're in thirds. The first 3, the second 3, and the last 3. And you can, right now, just to make sense of these, you can just use that kind of system to associate your layers, okay? So for my wall layer, that's of course going to be my heaviest layer, so I'm going to give it a red color, okay? My doors are going to be the next yellow, okay? And then we'll do another layer, windows. And we'll make that green. Now when you get good at this, or you enter an office and they have a certain way of doing things, you can start changing your layers a little bit, right? When you get a good sense for things, you can say, I don't really like my doors being yellow. Maybe I want my doors to be a step down from yellow and I want them green, right? But you understand the general principle of walls are always thickest, doors, windows are kind of the second, right? You grade it down from there. Okay, plumbing fixtures are going to be in that medium range, right? So maybe they're going to be cyan. Okay, and then stairs. Actually, the stairs are an architectural element, so I think I'm going to make those cyan. Okay, I'm going to make my plumbing fixtures blue instead. And then millwork is going to be either blue or magenta. We'll make it magenta just to make it different. Okay. So I've kind of looked at those and graded them down, you know, according to architectural element and what they are and where they are in the cut of the floor plane, etc. And this has already been drawn, and I look at it and I click on a layer and I look at what layer that is. It's layer 0, which is very bad, right? We don't want to be drawing floor plans on layer 0. So I want to change these. So I click on an object, or I select a couple objects. I use my drop down and I change it to wall. Escape, escape, right? I've got this little guy here, that's part of the wall. This is the wall. Now, here's a kind of a big difference between me and Jeff in this AutoCAD world. Jeff likes to make his walls, his interior walls and exterior walls, different layers. And I don't really like that. I just don't think it's necessary. So in the case of when we have an assignment where you will have to create some layers, right? He adds an interior wall layer, and I don't really think we need to do that. Anyway, just a side note if you see that in your book, right? Which you will. So I'm just going to make all my walls red. Now I can use the drop down wall. Another way that I could go about assigning these layers is I could type MA, enter, match properties. And once I have one wall associated, I can click and I can start matching. Way simpler, right? I use a blue selection window to grab these two little guys. Do you see? I'm using the blue selection window so that I don't grab that door on accident, right? Because if I had come this direction, do you see how the door starts changing? But if I go this direction, I can just grab that wall. I'm zooming, I'm panning. Again, I'm going to do a blue selection window so that I don't grab that door when I match. Green selection window to grab everything, and I just kind of work my way around the floor plan. Okay, easy, easy, right? Okay, now once I have all of my, I don't have them all yet, but once I did, I would have all my walls finished, I'm good to go, right? And I think, well, now it's time for me to do something else. So I'm going to do the stairs. I'm going to grab a stair, and you'll see me doing this all the time, right? I come up here, I click on stair. I usually will do one object, and then I'll match properties. MA, enter, click, and I'm just going to grab all those stairs. Now this is technically a wall, but for today I'm just going to cheat, and I'm going to count it as part of the stair. Okay, escape, escape. All right, plumbing fixtures, like bathtubs. All right, I'm going to grab one piece, drop down, change to plumbing fixture, escape, escape. And now that I have one piece kind of generated, I MA, match properties, again, just like always, and I start drawing or selecting and changing these objects. My sink. And you know, you're looking at this probably thinking, well, that's obviously a sink, but you also grab the piece of cabinetry around it, right? Yes. So now that piece of cabinetry could be counted in my plumbing fixture layer. Yes, right? It depends. Some of these things are a little bit open to interpretation, right? I could, maybe the place I work likes to have the cabinet on the cabinet layer, right? Maybe they don't really care because, you know, they don't know what the sink is. This is just representing a sink. So it doesn't matter if it's all in the plumbing fixture layer, right? These are all questions I would assume you ask yourselves when you're new at this, right? This is a cabinet. Does it go on the cabinet layer, but it's part of the sink? I don't know. You know, use your best judgment as long as it's not, you know, on the wall layer or door layer, right? I'll probably be, oh, they thought that was a cabinet, they put on the cabinet layer. That's fine, right? Or they thought maybe it's part of the sink and they didn't know, you know, close enough. Okay, MA, enter. I grab the toilet. There's a bunch of little pieces. I use my blue selection window to get the rest of them, right? I come over here to my sink. Blue selection window because I can just kind of hover over the whole thing and grab it, right? Looks pretty good. Doors. I grab a door, and I'm going to grab this little tag with it for now. I grab a door and a tag, and I drop down door. MA, match properties. Grab my little door there, and I just come around and start. All right, that's part of the wall, so this little guy is part of the wall, so I'll come back and get that with the wall. but you guys get the general idea, right? If you wanted to, you could kind of grab all these walls like this. You could grab everything, and then you could at one time just come down and change them to wall, right? There's really no right or wrong way of doing it. The best way is to do them right in the first place, but that rarely happens, right? You get drawing, you forget, and so that rarely happens, but the important part is that you go back and you fix them in whatever manner you're comfortable with, okay? Now, when I print this, Control P, we'll talk about printing soon, but when I print this, all of these line weights are going to look different, right? Do you see that? You see how the walls are very, very thick? This is slightly thinner than the wall, right? The plumbing fixture is thinner than that. Okay, I didn't get some of these walls done, obviously, but we get a really good graphic sense for what is what here, right? And you know, a set of drawings, these things aren't maybe emphasized as much as they should be, but I feel like a set of drawings is like reading a book. You want it to be clear, you want it to look nice, right? You want it to be readable so that mistakes don't happen, okay? So I'm very careful about trying to make things graphically correct so mistakes don't happen and they're easily readable, all right? Okay. Now, this was in a file that already had objects, right? Really, the same procedure is going to happen if you have a file that is blank. So I'd come over here and I'd hit New Drawing, click, right? And I would open up my Layer Properties dialog box here, click, and I would see layer 0 and I would think I don't draw on layer 0, right? And then I would start creating new layers. New, right? I could rename them, and then I would come in here and associate whatever properties I needed to with them, okay? Now, some topics we'll talk about on Monday. We're going to talk about how to formally name layers. There is a system that generally most offices follow. We're also going to start talking about creating a drawing template, right? And right now, when you're just brand new drawing, it may not seem very important, but a lot of this stuff takes time to set up in AutoCAD, right? It takes time to open up the drawing, save it, change the units. It takes time to create 15 different layers and give them names and colors and associations, right? Pretty soon you'll be using dimensions, so you'll have to create dimensions. Pretty soon you'll be using text, so you'll have to create text. And it just all takes time, right? So by the time you actually get to your assignment, you're 30 minutes in, right? And so my goal and what we're going to be doing next is you're going to be creating a drawing template, right? Which is a file that doesn't have any drawing in it, but contains all of your information that allows you to draw, right? So in that template file, you'll have the layers set up, you'll have your text set up, you'll have your dimensions set up, you'll have your pages set up to print, so that when you start like a brand new assignment, you don't have to set all those things up and take that time, right? You can just say, I'm going to open my template, it has all my layers, text, dimensions, they're good to go, and I start drawing, right? There's no messing around with that stuff. Yep.
When I try to match layer, like from the little toolbar, for some reason it's not working. When I do the MA, it's working.
It's a little bit different.
Okay.
This one, so sorry, I should have clarified that a little more. Match layer is going to be more associated with just the layers. Match properties will match anything. And so I think that match properties MA is a little bit easier to use, right? Because it will do anything. Match layers, you have an entry and you have an enter, and then you pick something and then it matches it. Match properties, MA, enter, click, 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 click. Yeah.
I like the MA much better.
Isn't it much better?
I like that too. It was kind of making
Right.
me
Yeah. Like, wait a minute. So what's nice about match properties is you can match texts, right? If you create a text style, you can match another text. If you create a dimension, you can match dimension styles, you can match hatch, really anything. So I would just kind of, this isn't okay, but I think match properties is much more useful. All right. Any questions about anything AutoCAD related so far? Okay, I think, let me just look at my book here, make sure I didn't forget anything, but on Monday, your assignment, you're going to start creating a template file. You'll start that, which will be associated with creating layers that have the proper name. So we'll talk about that. And then let's see what is next. We have Printing. So we'll start printing after that, which will be magical, right? All right, let me unlink you guys. No new assignment for this weekend, so just finish up the drawing assignment that you currently have.